Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Zachary will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Zachary, you are recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. Good morning, members. Members, I'm just going to share 5 verses with you. No commentary. I just want to share these verses. I was reading through James 3 last night. And as I was reading the last section of James, I just felt compelled to share this morning. James 3, starting in verse 13. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. Let's pray. Father God, you're good to us, Lord. Thank you for a new day. This is the day you have made. We'll rejoice and be glad in it, Lord. Thank you for the incredible honor you have given all of us to serve 7 million people in the state of Tennessee. I pray that we do so with sincerity, Lord. And God, I just pray that we do it for an audience of one, Lord. God, there's so much contentiousness in our society, Lord, but we live in an incredible state. And while we do have disagreements, God, there are statesmen among us, Lord, who respect the institution, who respect each other and just desire to serve you well, Lord. So grant us wisdom as we do the work of the people, Lord. Order every step that we take, God, Lord. And you tell us in James 1:5 that if we ask for wisdom, you'll grant it. So God, we just ask for it, Lord. Thank you for how you love us, Lord. Thank you for a saving faith we have through Christ, Lord. We love you, Jesus, in your name. Amen.
Representative Zachary, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Ms. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 95 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representatives Farmer, Faison, and Parkinson are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Shaw. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like for you in the House to help me wish Miss Allison Sneed, my executive assistant, a happy birthday, who's been with me for over 20 years.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I have with me today up in the gallery the Chief Deputy from the Giles County Sheriff's Department, Mr. Brandon Beard. There he is. Stand on up. Thank you.
Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The District of Champions has struck again. Not only is Hollow Rock Brewston Central High School the home of Patrick Willis, but they've also tried to corner the market on pages. I've got 4 more pages this week from Brewston. Miss Avery Hollingsworth, Stella Higdon, Lily McGee, Monica Whitman, and her sponsor, Christy Brasher, has done a great job with them, and Miss Tiffany McGee got them here safely. So a warm welcome to those.
Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to honor a pro football player, Mr. Trey Smith of the Kansas City Chiefs, on his 2nd Super Bowl win in his short 3-year career. He's from Three-Way, Tennessee in Madison County, a fine young man, and I think he's earned the nickname now, I-65, number 65. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to honor the Meigs County Sheriff's Department in my district, who is suffering this morning with the potential loss of one of their own, Deputy Robert Leonard. Been out of the academy for 2 months, and he made a stop last night sometime before midnight, and he made a transmission that suspect was in custody. 12 minutes elapsed, another transmission that was garbled, and the only word that the sheriff could make out was the word water. He was near the Tennessee River off of 60 Highway where the ferry used to dock. They've got a dive team, 2 dive teams from THP, Hamilton County. People are struggling there, and these are friends of mine. And they have found his patrol car in the water, but they've not found him or the suspect.
Take a moment. Thank you. Thank you. Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a page here today, H.K. Mayberry. I want to welcome her and let the folks know that she may be on the House floor Sunday. She did some research on her own to see what the ladies wear to make sure she was dressed appropriately. So if you would make her feel welcome, her mom and dad are up in the gallery. Thank you.
Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is my assistant's 29th birthday. I thank Grace Bonecutter. I hope you'll wish her a happy birthday.
Representative Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also have a page today. I would like to welcome Lauren Uribe, a student in Brentwood Middle School, as a legislative page today. She's a young leader with a call for community service and volunteering, and I'd like to acknowledge her parents, Joy and Margaret Uribe. Thank you for being here today, Lauren.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask my colleagues to just rise in honor of our Board of Directors for Tennessee School Resource Officers and Deputy Captain Daryl Cook, who brought them down today. These folks are our first line of deterrence in evil in our schools, and they're great mentors. We love them. We appreciate them. Thank you for coming.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Sunday, the nation came together and recognized that there is nothing more American than football. But yesterday, we were reminded that there is nothing more American than mass shootings. Yesterday, a day that was supposed to be about celebration in Kansas City was turned into a day of terror, where 1 person was killed and 21 others were left with gunshot wounds, including 9 children. A day of celebration turned into a day of terror, and I would call for a moment of silence, but I honestly cannot. I just simply ask that we pray with our hands and our feet and do something to end this tragedy, this constant tragedy, this constant terror of gun violence that is a uniquely American problem. So I urge my colleagues, let's come up with solutions together before we leave this session. Thank you.
Representative Raper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome, she's in the upper gallery there, my new legislative assistant, Haley Hardcastle. She needs your prayers and God's blessing because she's working with me. So once again, please welcome Haley Hardcastle.
Representative Towns. Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. Colleagues, I too stand as we need to commemorate what happened yesterday on Valentine's Day in Kansas City, where Lisa Lopez, as Representative Jones mentioned, was killed due to this gun violence, and over 20 other people were wounded. Yesterday, Valentine's Day, is also the 6th anniversary of the Parkland shooting, where at Majority Stoneman High School 6 years ago, the students there, one being David Hogg, who's become a significant activist in the gun violence prevention movement, all were terrorized as they walked over and saw many of their classmates be killed. This gun violence epidemic is uniquely American, and it is also preventable in so many cases. And we have a responsibility to prevent it with good legislation. And that is why we have been sent here. And that is the work that each and every one of us must do.
Any more welcome and honoring? Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple of weeks ago, I recognized West Tennessee District 47 there within TDOT, and they got hit on the side of the road, cleaning off and patching potholes. Well, yesterday, that same crew was patching potholes again on I-55 and got hit again. So I just want to bring awareness to move over and slow down just a little bit when you see those guys out there patching the potholes. And, I know there's a lot of potholes to be patched, but thankful for no one lost their life, just a lot of bruises and bangs. But y'all pray for them as they heal.
Thank you. Any further welcome and honoring? Let the journal reflect. Representative Gantt is excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar. Refer to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing and allowing that be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Leader Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bills 2,974 through 2,977 be introduced and passed on first consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that Senate Bills 1,583, 1,595, 1,614, 1,641, 1,644, 1,674, 1,677, 1,698, 1,749, 1,793, 1,967, and 1,975 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of the companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration. House bills on second consideration.
Leader Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House Bills 2,969 through 2,973 be passed on second consideration to be held on the desk or refer to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration. House bills on second consideration.
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
Oh,
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we've already completed those orders of business. Petitions and memorials, reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been passed to the consent calendar on third and final consideration. Keep with Rule 50.
Gentlemen, moves passed to the consent calendar, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Thank you. Anyone seeking recognition on consent calendar? Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I'd like to object to item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, our rules require that those be objected to in writing. We have a form at the clerk's desk.
So you have to sign to object. That completes the consent calendar. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Mr. Clerk, call up first bill.
House Bill 1680 by Representative Alexander and others relative to abuse or neglect of adults.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1680 on third and final consideration.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized. Oh, yes. Representative Alexander moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill simply restores the ability for adult protective services to investigate self-neglect.
You renew your motion.
Sorry.
Representative Alexander renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1680 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Bill 1680, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1687 by Representative Barrett and others relative to emergency communication personnel requirements.
Representative Barrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1687 on third and final consideration.
Representative Barrett moves passage following second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Barrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill has nothing to do with Coach Nick Saban. Instead, this bill corrects current law, which requires 911 dispatchers to get their physicals from a licensed physician. This will change the law to allow them to get their physicals from physician's assistants or nurse practitioners. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Barrett renews the motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you so much, and thanks, sponsor. Just the clarification, the requirements that a physician assistant would have will be similar to what physicians would currently have in the way that the law is currently structured. It's not that they're going to get a different type of test, and they are still going to have the supervision of a physician. Is that correct?
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Representative. Yes, the same standards will apply for the physical test.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the sponsor. All across the state of Tennessee, 911 are the tip of the spear. Every bad situation resolution begins with them. There are shortages in almost every district. This will make it easier. Thank you for the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Oh, Representative Hardaway, didn't see him. You're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I just want the sponsor to speak to the psychiatric or psychological evaluation, whether this impacts that process.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you for the question. The purpose of the bill is to make it easier and cheaper for our candidates that are trying to apply to work with the 911 dispatcher offices in order to get these physicals that are required. Right now, we do have a shortage, as Representative Moon pointed out, and it's difficult to get folks to fill these positions. So this bill is going to make it easier for them to get through that process and also cheaper as well. As far as the mental examinations or physical examinations, all of the same standards are going to apply. We're not changing any of the rules that they're going to have to meet in order to qualify for the position.
Representative. All right. Any further discussion? Representative Kiesling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a great bill. Just as the sponsor, Chairman Moon, has already stated, it's going to be a cost savings across the state. And to tell you, of course, this thing sailed through both our Public Service Commission, our service rather, and our committee, State Gov Committee. I'm going to encourage each and every one for support on this one. Thank you. Thank you for this, Representative Barrett and Chairman. Speaker, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Oh, Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just for clarification, if Nick Saban became an EMT, would he be able to get a physical by then?
All right, we're moving on. All right. Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1687, vote aye when the bell rings. All those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Bill 1687 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1688 by Representative Bolso and others relative to the deposit of driver's license in lieu of bail.
Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1688 on third and final consideration.
Representative Bolso moves passage. Following seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill simply removes an outdated part of our code that previously required that municipalities be given the flexibility of allowing posting of a driver's license in lieu of bail. This is not a procedure that our municipalities are following right now, and I, Mr. Speaker, renew my motion.
Representative Bolso renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thanks, Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. Just want to make sure we confirm that point because I'm always worried when we read something that says it's removing authority away from municipalities and counties. But this practice in particular, as I understand, the fiscal notice says, according to the Department of Safety, the process is not currently utilized by any counties or municipalities. Thus, it wouldn't have any fiscal impact on the department. So just want to make sure that that's clear, that no counties currently are doing that or have done this for quite some time. Is that your understanding as well?
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, that is my understanding.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for running the bill. It's very common sense. We don't do it anymore, and it's antiquated. I appreciate you taking care of it.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, does the present law allow the counties to do this or not do it by ordinance already?
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, under the current statute, municipalities, other local governments have the flexibility to allow posting of a driver's license in lieu of bail. It's a procedure that's not being used. This bill would remove the statute that allows that flexibility.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. So what's the impetus behind the bill? Why are we taking the discretion away from the 95 counties?
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Simply because this procedure is not being used in any of the 95 counties, and this effectively is cleaning up our motor vehicle code, Title 55, so that the laws that remain on the books are the ones that are actually being used by the public and by local governments.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. I've got some concerns on taking the discretion away from counties on what essentially boils down to bail process. If I'm correct, these instances where the driver's license would be put up or confiscated would be in lieu of taking someone in and them being required to post a bail. Is that correct?
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I understand the question correctly, the basis for this particular legislation is that the process that your question concerns is actually not being used, because when the statute was passed that allowed this procedure of posting a driver's license in 1971, a driver's license served a very different purpose from the purposes that it serves today as a principal means of identification, of voting, and of other things. So municipalities have over time, over the last 53 years, completely moved away from this concept of posting a driver's license in lieu of bail. And because no county in the state is using or has used this procedure for some period of time, the Department of Safety, and we agree, believes that it's something that should be removed from the code.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. And I'm going to respectfully disagree with your assessment of where we are in terms of the counties and the possibilities for the citizens to ask the counties whether or not to implement such an ordinance. I'm concerned that we're once again doing things that do two things. One is taking the discretion out of the hands of local folk. And two is, this is a part of what should be a full discussion on bail reform. So thank you for engaging.
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, I would simply point out that this bill came through the committee system, both the Civil Justice Subcommittee and the full committee, and there were no objections raised by any citizens, much less municipal governments.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. And I respect the committee process, but I don't sit on civil justice. I sit on criminal justice. And this is one of those bills that I would suggest should have come through both committees. Thank you, sir.
Representative Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, there's a reason why 95 counties don't have this in practice. One is it creates an undue hardship on someone who's already in a financial stressful situation. You take away their driver's license, how are they going to get to work? How are they going to get around? I don't know if that was taken into consideration. I wasn't on that committee, so I didn't have a chance to ask these questions. And that's something that's a big issue, because once you take away someone's license, then they get a driving on suspended or a driving on revoked. And those things they get on probation for. And then once you're on probation, it starts this cycle. And it's a cycle that is undue pressure on the citizen. They still have to get to work. They still have to pay their bills. They still have to get their children to school. So how does this bill address that without creating that burden on people?
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, you raise a good point, Representative. If one deprives a citizen of a driver's license, it does have the collateral effects that you're referring to, which is a very good reason to repeal the statute as it currently exists.
Representative Dixie.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said. Could you repeat that?
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was simply pointing out that you raise a good point. That is that when you remove a driver's license from the possession of a licensed driver, that has collateral impacts on employment, taking children to school, other things. And so that's an additional consideration why it makes sense for this legislation to pass, repealing this portion of our motor vehicle code.
Representative Dixie.
So I guess I'm confused. How does this make more sense by putting an undue burden on people and actually mail collateral to what's going on? So I'm just confused. Can you elaborate a little bit on how this would make it easier on people? Mr. Speaker, if I can have everyone's attention.
Leader Lamberth, you can answer that question.
Yes, please. So bail has changed dramatically, as you know better than anyone in the room, over the last 50 years. Used to, they take somebody's driver's license because they kind of figured, look, you're not going to just leave that behind at court. But nobody does that anymore. And exactly as you stated in your opening comments, that would be detrimental to a person. So we're no longer going to take somebody's driver's license away from them to post bail. They'll just go through the regular bail processes like we've talked about at length on this floor. It's an antiquated part of the law. It's just cleaning up the code, but we're not going to take their driver's license anymore because then they can't drive or vote or cash a check or do anything else. It just doesn't make any sense to do it. I hope that answers the questions, but folks need a photo ID, and this bill says no city or county is ever going to be able to take somebody's driver's license just to post bail. They can go through the regular process.
Representative Dixie.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation. I guess I wasn't picking up what Representative Bolso was putting down. So thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate the sponsor bringing this bill forward. I just wanted to remind everyone that this legislation came through criminal sub and criminal full. It came through criminal sub on January the 30th, and the votes that were recorded were ayes prevail. There were no votes recorded. Then on February the 6th, in our Criminal Justice Full Committee, it was a voice vote, ayes prevail. no no's were recorded. So I just wanted to reiterate, thank you very much for bringing this. Obviously, when the Department of Safety concurs with what you're bringing forward, that's an important group that wants to make sure that we're doing things properly. So thank you very much for this legislation.
Representative, nope, we're good. All right. Chairman Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I can't say any more that my colleague before me just said. It did come through the Criminal Justice Committee process. It was unanimous votes going through. This is an old, antiquated law that has not been utilized by counties or municipalities for a number of years. Each year we have bills that come through our committees that deal with bail and bail reform and the bail process. And this is one, again, that has not been utilized. It's a true cleanup bill. We're going to get this off of the books because no one is using it. So thank you, sponsor, for carrying this bill.
Representative Hardaway at Leader Camper's desk.
Thank you, Speaker. My no vote will be recorded today, but just a little clarification. When I was in college, I was stopped in a rural area. I won't say which one it was, but they took my license, gave me a receipt that was good for driving until the court date. So that might be a little before, well, your time. So that's the process as I've seen it firsthand. But my vote will be recorded today, and I'll pay more attention to making sure that my no votes are recorded in criminal justice sub and criminal justice full. Thank you, Speaker.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call for the question.
Question's been called. Is there objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1688, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, 6 nays, 1 present, not voting.
House Bill 1688, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1620 by Representative Gillespie and others relative to the use of drones. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1645.
Representative Gillespie moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1645 without objection. So ordered. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1645 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage of Senate Bill 1645 on third and final consideration. Will be seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. What this simply does is involving drones and their use by law enforcement. This body approved that many, many years ago. And what this is simply doing is removing the sunset for the use of drones under the current parameters that have already defined by law for them to continue to use that vital tool to fight crime and help with their missions. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, sponsor, for the bill. And I appreciate the opportunity to sign on as a co-sponsor. I think it's there's some real irony that this bill is up the day after we had that mass shooting yesterday in Kansas City. But that's the kind of thing that this bill will allow law enforcement to continue to do in ensuring public safety. So thank you.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker and sponsor. I just have a few questions related to this. One of the key notes here is that this bill provides aerial coverage for public or private property with the consent of the private property owner when used for providing or enhancing security for an event open to the public. What is the process for law enforcement to get permission when the property is public, for instance, a school or something like that? Does the LEA give permission? Is the principal? Do all parents sign a form for law enforcement to be able to use drones on the property? And how are we protecting our children or community's identity in these cases if they are not the alleged perpetrators of a crime?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's a whole slew of procedures and rules and policies in place that this bill does not address. I would refer you to go back and look at the department's policies, depending on where your hypothetical scenario is taking place. This is just simply allowing the use of what we already do and the procedures that we already have so that we don't have to vote on this every couple of years. That it's just like police use radios now. The General Assembly does not have to approve them to use radios every 4 years. That is all this bill is doing.
Representative Pearson.
Yeah, thank you. And so, and thank you for that, sponsor. I'm worried about, concerned about, interested in the consequences of us continuing to allow for this to happen. And so are you saying you right now don't know or understand how it works when drones are used on public property?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quite frankly, no, I do not know, because there are multiple, dozens, maybe hundreds of rules involving the use of drones by law enforcement bodies across the state. There are rules involving how LEAs regulate their security. I mean, I would imagine there's a, no, I do not have that information at this time.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you so much, sponsor. I think sort of without that information, I want to just make sure that if, again, we are approving for law enforcement to be able to do this, that those protections are in place. And so maybe having more time to actually look at what the consequences of this would be for our education system in particular, and the places that are involved in the public. While I understand, and I think it's a good idea to have or ensure that permission is granted from private landowners to have surveillance be used as a part of any criminal inquiry, making sure that we have those protections and knowing what those protections are, I think are going to be really important for us before voting on this. Thank you.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just simply say or ask you, if you have those concerns, to go to your local law enforcement and your local LEA to discover what they do and what they don't do. Over the last several years, this technology has already been utilized. We're not changing any of that. And I would just simply say that there are protections in place. There are privacy policies in place. Those have been, I'm sure, they get mishandled occasionally. And when that does happen, it is brought to light and there's investigations done. This is something that happens on a daily basis, whether it be a sports stadium, a music festival, or you know, I'm sure the unfortunate tragedy that took place last night on the Tennessee River. Drones are vital to law enforcement and fire departments across the state, and they've been using them for years, for the most part in responsible manners. And I would again consult you to, or ask you to go maybe talk to your local law enforcement, your local LEAs, to see what policies they have in place.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you for that, sponsor. I do think it's really important that we have drones, that we use technology in a responsible way, and part of our work and ensuring the protection of the folks that we represent is penultimate in the work that we do as well. So thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question lies with this part here. We're allowing this to be used without a search warrant or warrant exception to investigate the scene of a crime that is occurring or has occurred. My question with regard to that is, let's say I've got a farm, a crime has occurred on that farm 5 years ago. Does that still allow law enforcement to use a drone to surveil my farm property without my permission, without a warrant, just because a crime occurred there 5 years ago.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So you're asking me if a crime took place on your property 5 years ago, would law enforcement be able to use a drone today?
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, under this language, it says it can be used without a search warrant or warrant exception to investigate the scene of a crime that has occurred. So the scene of a crime could happen anywhere, but does that provide law enforcement an unended opportunity to surveil that property and that private property for eternity? Or is there a final date there where they no longer have the right to invade someone's privacy, because personal property is very important?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would again just ask you to review the rules that are already in place and have been in practice for years regarding this matter. As far as evidence or getting a search warrant, this does not change any of the current procedures in place that we already have. So I would simply say that if you have a problem with some of those issues now, then you had a problem with them yesterday as well.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, my problem is that someone's privacy might be violated without a search warrant or any other exemption just because their property may have been the scene of a crime at no fault of their own once upon a time. So the fact that I am concerned about it now is pertinent because we're looking to provide and remove a sunset on this law for eternity in the code. So I think everybody has a privacy interest and might be concerned about whether or not they're foregoing that privacy interest and right just because someone else committed a crime on their property.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you. I mean, it says in here that consent has to be given. There are parameters on how long the data, or not data, how long the footage can be stored, as well as, it cannot be admissible as evidence in a criminal prosecution. It was obtained unlawfully. So I believe those protections that you're referring to are in place, and we're not changing them with this.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not to break the point, but the consent provision is a different provision. This provision is wholly separate from that, does not require consent, does not require any process. It simply allows the investigation of the same where a crime occurred. The question just is simple. Just because a crime occurred on a piece of property does not forever give law enforcement the right to invade someone's privacy for eternity, just because a third party happened to commit a crime on that private property. So I think it's very concerning that we don't know and can't say that we're just opening this up to permanent investigation, permanent surveillance in the code. But thank you for trying to answer my questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The debate has to be on whether you're going to go past this sunset. It's not the elements that were in the original bill. If you voted this down, then you're going to eliminate law enforcement's ability to use a drone in any of these areas till you run a new bill. So that's what you're voting on, and that's where the debate ought to be, is you're going to let it sunset or you're going to keep on going. It came through criminal justice, and we'll keep it on going. If you don't like these things, then we need to run another bill that pairs that back if it's an issue of Fourth Amendment.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciated our chairman, his comments. That's exactly what I was going to say, that this bill essentially deals with the sunsets, and that's what we're actually voting on, and that is what is changing. That current law already has this. We're just changing it to where it's going forward. We do not have to come back and renew it every 4 years. Correct?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, ma'am, that is correct. And I'm sorry if I did not state that at the beginning.
Chairman Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This came through the Criminal Justice Committees again. It's a true cleanup bill. We're removing the sunset provision that was on this. This was public chapter 462 from 2021. There was a very spirited debate back then about the use of drones and how they can be utilized by law enforcement friends. Just recently in my district, there's a person who had come up missing. And I found out yesterday afternoon that law enforcement had used one of these drones to help surveil a creek where that person was perhaps last seen last week. And so it is a very valuable tool that they use. When we remove this sunset, it is going to further advance the opportunities for law enforcement, not changing the law, not adding any new things to what we've done. We're just removing that sunset. But this bill has passed through the committee process this year unopposed, and it also in 2021 passed the committee process unopposed and passed on the House floor 93-0. Thank you.
Representative McCallum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1645, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, 2 nays, 2 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 1645, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reads table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1621 by Representative Hale, relative to the DeKalb County Road Supervisor.
Representative Hale, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1621 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hale moves passage. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hale, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a local bill for DeKalb County, and basically it's just simply removing the requirement that the county mayor signs the checks for our road supervisor. It went through local government. It was a consent item and got moved, so I renew my motion.
Representative Hale renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1621, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Bill 1621 and received a constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Representative Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw House Bill 2800 from the committee in the House.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Representative Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consultation with both leaders, I move that the rules be suspended for immediate introduction and consideration of House Joint Resolution 941.
Mr. Clerk, please read the caption.
House Joint Resolution 941 by Chairman Terry, a resolution to honor and remember Toby Keith Cole.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Representative Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of House Joint Resolution 941.
Representative Terry moves adoption. Any discussion? Representative Jones. You have a question? Discussion?
Yeah. I just want to say that I support this resolution, that I'm not going to bump it because I'm not going to be like my colleagues.
Representative Jones, that's out of order. Moving on. Representative Terry moves adoption of House Joint Resolution 941, probably seconded. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 941 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it without objection. Motion reconsider is tabled. Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that items 1 through 13 objected to in today's consent calendar be referred to the Calendar and Rules Committee.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Unfinished business. Representative Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an announcement. Is it too late to make it?
Announcements next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're welcome. All right, next order, Ms. Clark.
Announcements.
Announcements. Representative Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House Children and Family Affairs Subcommittee is creating a parental rights bill priority calendar. This priority calendar will take place on Tuesday, March the 5th, and the bills will need to be placed on notice by Wednesday, February the 28th at 3:30. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Crawford, did I see your hand?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The House Property and Planning Subcommittee will have a special calendar dedicated to veterans. This will be on March 20th, 2024. If any members have any questions, please contact me or my staff. Thank you.
Representative Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just would like to wish everyone a happy holiday on Monday and remind members of the Finance Committee that we will be back in action Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock for budget hearings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further announcements? Representative Carringer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Population Health Subcommittee will set a final calendar to be heard March 5th. The deadline to place a bill on notice to be considered in the subcommittee this year will be Wednesday, February the 28th at 3:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A reminder to the Transportation Committee, we will still meet at 8 a.m. on Tuesday. Also, if you haven't gotten your amendments filed yet for the transportation omnibus bills, please do so. The deadline is approaching and the Senate has already set their deadline for February 29th. We usually track pretty closely, but it's approaching, so please get those in. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, due to the holiday on Monday, the committee amendment filing deadline for committees that meet on Tuesday will be the close of business 4:30 Friday.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 94 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Thursday, February 22nd, 2024.
Without objection, the House stands recessed till 9 a.m. on Thursday, February 22nd, 2024.